That Christmas morning, I walked into my parents' house carrying two secrets I thought might finally change the way my family looked at me. My name is Laura. I was 32 years old, and for the first time in my life, I believed I had news worthy of pride. In October, Mark, the man who had loved me with a steadiness I had never known at home, had slipped a ring on my finger during a hike in the mountains. Around the same time, my company promoted me to senior marketing coordinator, a role I had worked toward for years with late nights and endless patience. I wanted to tell the story in the living room where our family tree still glowed with white lights and the angel topper that had crowned it since I was a child. I wanted to say it aloud at a table set with the china that had marked every holiday of my memory. And I wanted to see my mother's face soften for once. My father, John, greeted me at the door, his bear hug as warm as ever. He asked about my new position, and for a fleeting moment, I felt seen. Then my mother, Barbara, appeared, dressed in the red sweater I had given her the year before. Her eyes scanned me up and down, and she asked why on earth I would wear a green dress that made me look washed out. She commented on my hair as though I had just rolled out of bed. I tried to smile, to brush it away. But her words landed heavy. In the living room, my sister Jennifer sat poised in a navy suit, glowing under my mother's praise, while my brother Stephen checked messages from the hospital in his expensive sweater and watch. Jennifer smirked that I was late. I explained I had only stopped for gas, but nobody cared to listen. I placed my gifts beneath the tree, my purse holding the velvet ring box, and tried to quiet the drum of my own heartbeat. I had thought this year might be different. I had thought maybe, finally, the words I carried would matter. From the time I was old enough to understand the balance of attention in our house, I knew I was not the favored child. My older brother Stephen was the golden boy, and my younger sister Jennifer was the darling. That left me in the middle, a position that felt less like a place and more like a shadow when Stephen came home with a report card full of B's. Barbara celebrated as if he had solved world hunger when Jennifer threw a tantrum and smashed a glass. Barbara called her spirited and imaginative. When I raised my voice once, only once, I was told I needed an attitude adjustment. It was not just that their mistakes were forgiven while mine were magnified. It was the message that I would have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. In high school, I started working part-time at the grocery store and tutoring younger kids. We did not need the money. I did it because I believed that if I could contribute something tangible, maybe I would prove my worth. I bought Barbara flowers for Mother's Day and jewelry for her birthday, carefully wrapped with ribbons I tied myself. I searched through catalogs to find gifts for Christmas, ones I thought would make her smile. Stephen and Jennifer often grabbed something last minute at the mall, but their gifts brought tears and long embraces. Mine were received with polite thanks and quickly set aside. When the time came to choose a college major, I had already learned to expect disappointment. I picked marketing because I loved the mix of creativity and strategy. To me, it was storytelling, the art of reaching people where they lived and convincing them to believe in something bigger. To Barbara, it was a joke. She told me it was not a real career, that it was playing with pretty pictures. She compared me to Stephen, who was preparing for medical school, and Jennifer, who had announced her dream of law school. Why can't you do something meaningful, something that actually helps people, she asked. I nodded, but inside I was breaking. I did not change my major, though. I pushed forward, earned my degree with honors, and took the first job I could find at a small downtown firm. The early years were brutal, long hours and little pay, but I proved myself. Every campaign I built, every client I brought in, felt like climbing a mountain alone. When I called home, eager to share a success, Barbara's response was always the same. That's nice. Dear, did I tell you Stephen was just published in a medical journal? Jennifer won another case. Each call ended with my accomplishments drowned under theirs. Still, I kept trying. I remembered every birthday, every anniversary. I gave up vacation time at 26 to help John and Barbara move into a new house. I painted the walls, organized the boxes, scrubbed floors until my hands ached, while Stephen said he was too busy with residency and Jennifer said her firm needed her. I dog-sat their German Shepherd whenever they left town, even though I was allergic. My weekends ended in hives and antihistamines, but no one thought of that when John had emergency gallbladder surgery. I took time off work to drive him to the hospital and sit in the waiting room for 6 hours while Barbara worried aloud. Later, she scolded me for not updating Stephen and Jennifer more often. I swallowed the sting. What cut deepest was not the lack of thanks, but the constant comparison. It was as if everything I did was weighed against my siblings and found lighter, even when it was heavier. I was exhausted long before I was 30, but I did not stop. I thought maybe if I kept showing up, kept paying attention, kept sacrificing, eventually Barbara would see me. Maybe she would stop calling me difficult. Maybe she would be proud. That was the hope I carried, even when it hurt to believe it. The gift exchange unfolded just as I had feared. Stephen handed over envelopes with sleek gift cards, clearly bought on his way home from the hospital. But because they were from luxury stores, my mother reacted as though he had performed a miracle. She exclaimed about his thoughtfulness, told the relatives how generous he was, and hugged him tightly. Jennifer presented a weekend getaway to a spa resort, and for nearly 20 minutes the room buzzed with planning, questions about the amenities, and praise for her success. I waited quietly with my carefully chosen packages. When it was finally my turn, I handed Stephen a monogrammed leather briefcase, Jennifer a set of engraved pens, and my parents a photo album I had spent weeks building. Each page held restored photographs, scanned and retouched, printed and arranged in layouts I designed late into the night. I imagined Barbara smiling as she turned the pages, maybe even crying at the images of birthdays and summer trips. Instead, she flipped through quickly, said it was nice, and then told Stephen to show everyone the new watch his colleague had given him. I felt the air leave my chest as if my effort had no weight at all. John reached for my shoulder and whispered that the album was beautiful, but the moment had already slipped away. I moved to the kitchen to keep busy. The smell of turkey roasting filled the air, and I checked the timer, mashed potatoes, stirred gravy. Barbara stood at the counter giving orders without looking up. "The turkey comes out in 20 minutes. Someone needs to set the table." When I asked where Jennifer was, she said Jennifer was with Grandma Dorothy and shouldn't have to worry about kitchen work because she worked so hard during the week. I wanted to ask whether my own long hours and late nights counted for nothing, but I bit my tongue. As I carried plates into the dining room, I passed the hallway and froze. Barbara's voice floated from the living room where she spoke with Aunt Susan. She said in that dismissive tone I knew too well, "Laura's still at that little ad place. And Mark, he teaches high school English. At least it's stable, I suppose." My stomach tightened. It was one thing to belittle me directly, but to diminish Mark as well, the man who had loved me without condition, was a cruelty I had not expected. I stood there holding a stack of plates, invisible and humiliated, before stepping back into the kitchen where no one noticed. The hours before dinner stretched like years. I touched the ring box in my purse over and over, wondering whether I had made a mistake bringing it. I had planned to announce my news during dessert, when the family might be relaxed, when the timing felt right. But as the afternoon wore on, watching Barbara light up at every mention of Stephen's latest case or Jennifer's courtroom victory, doubt crept in. What if my engagement only earned me another shrug, another cutting remark? What if the one moment I wanted to hold as joy became just another wound? Still, I told myself, I had to try. I could not let fear silence me again. By 3 o'clock, the dining room was ready. The long table dressed with Barbara's finest china, the same white and blue pattern that had marked every holiday since childhood. John sat at one end, Grandma Dorothy at the other, and the rest of us filled in according to the unspoken hierarchy that always placed me between my youngest cousin and the empty chair where my grandfather used to sit. The conversation began easily enough. Stephen talked about the expansion of his medical practice. Jennifer described her latest promotion. Janet chattered about her upcoming wedding. I smiled when spoken to, laughed at Uncle Frank's jokes, and passed dishes down the table, all while rehearsing the words in my head. During a lull, Grandma looked at me kindly and asked, "Laura, Are you still working at that little advertising company downtown? I corrected her gently. It was a marketing firm, and for the first time in years, I tried to step into the light. Actually, I just got promoted to senior coordinator. I'll be leading my own team. Aunt Susan offered warm congratulations, but before the moment could settle, Barbara cut across the table. Laura thinks making pretty pictures is the same as having a real career. I keep telling her she should go back to school for something substantial, like nursing or teaching. Heat rushed to my face, but I held my ground. Marketing is a real career. Mom, it requires strategy and analysis. I wanted to keep the momentum, so I reached into my purse and pulled out the velvet box. My hands trembled, but my voice was steady, and I have even bigger news. Mark proposed. We're engaged. For a second, there was silence, then scattered congratulations. John's smile was genuine. Dorothy squeezed my hand, but Barbara's face remained unchanged, her eyes sharp. Jennifer leaned forward. When did this happen, October? I said. We went hiking in the mountains. It was perfect. Barbara's voice cut like glass. October. You've been engaged for 2 months and you're just telling us now, always so secretive. Laura, no wonder we never know what's happening in your life. Stephen asked what Mark did, though I had told him many times. He's a high school English teacher. Barbara repeated the word teacher as if it were an insult. Well, at least it's stable, she said, making it clear she found him unimpressive. Jennifer laughed without warmth. I hope he knows what he's getting into. Laura's always been the difficult one. Barbara nodded, agreeing as if I were not at the table. Challenging. She has never made things easy on herself or anyone else. The words hit harder than I expected. Sharper because I had come carrying joy. John raised his glass to toast our engagement, and a few followed, but the moment felt forced. As dessert was served, Barbara launched into another list of Stephen's accolades, then Jennifer's courtroom victories, and then she turned to me with a final blow, her voice level but cruel. You're 32. Laura, you live in a tiny apartment, work at a job that barely pays the bills, and you've never really accomplished anything significant. You are the most useless child we have. The silence that followed was absolute. I sat frozen, ring box still in my hand, with every eye at the table waiting for me to respond. The words hung in the air like smoke, filling every corner of the room. For a moment I could not breathe. Then something inside me shifted. It was not the familiar ache of disappointment or the urge to shrink down and disappear. It was clarity. I set the ring box carefully on the table and pushed back my chair. My hands trembled, but my voice when it came was steady. Then stop calling me when you need money. Barbara's expression faltered. What are you talking about? She asked. But her voice had lost its sharp edge. I reached for my purse and pulled out my phone. My thumb moved across the screen with a certainty that surprised me. I'm talking about the $1,500 I've been sending you every month for the past 2 years to cover your car payments. I'm talking about the $3,000 I gave you last spring when Dad's surgery wasn't fully covered by insurance. I'm talking about the $2,000 I sent for Jennifer's bar exam fees after she burned through her trust fund on that trip to Europe. I lifted the phone high enough for everyone to see. Every transfer, every check, every loan that was never paid back, I have receipts. The room erupted in whispers. Aunt Susan's mouth dropped open. Uncle Frank set down his fork, and Janet's eyes widened. Dorothy sat straighter, her gaze fixed on Barbara with a look that mixed disappointment and dawning understanding. I scrolled through the app and read the entries aloud. September 15th, 1,500 to Barbara Miller. October 3rd, 1,500, November 7th, 2,000 to John Miller for medical expenses. December 19th, 1,500 to Barbara Miller. Each date landed like a hammer. John turned toward Barbara, his face gray. Barbara, is this true? He asked. She opened and closed her mouth. It's not what it sounds like. Laura was just helping out temporarily, until we got back on our feet. Temporarily, I said. A bitter laugh escaped before I could stop it. 2 years of monthly payments. 2 years of me living paycheck to paycheck while you drove around in a car I was paying for. 2 years of sacrificing my own stability while you told anyone who would listen that I was useless. I turned to Stephen, whose face had gone pale. Remember last Christmas when your student loans went into default because your practice wasn't earning enough yet? Who do you think paid that off? It wasn't Mom and Dad. It was me. $4,000 I had been saving for a down payment on a house. Stephen's voice was hoarse. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, I said. Because Mom made me promise not to tell. She said it would embarrass you. Jennifer stared at her plate, her voice small. I didn't know you paid for my exam. You weren't supposed to know. I said, just like you weren't supposed to know about the hospital bills, or the loans, or all the other times I covered for this family. Every time I picked up the pieces, every time I carried the weight, Mom told me to keep quiet. And I did, because I thought if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, maybe she would finally see me. Maybe she would finally be proud. I turned back to Barbara. You want to know what kind of man proposes to someone like me, the kind who sees that I've been keeping this family afloat while you dismissed my job as meaningless, the kind who recognizes that I've been sacrificing my own dreams so that all of you could keep yours. That's what he sees. Barbara shook her head, trying to recover. Families help each other. That's what we do. No, I said, my voice stronger now. Families support each other with respect. What you do is take my money while calling me useless. What you do is use me as a safety net and then shame me for existing. But tonight, it ends. I slipped the phone back into my purse and looked straight at her. The Bank of Laura is permanently closed. The silence that followed was absolute. The ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway grew louder than any voice. Barbara's mouth opened, but no words came. Dorothy folded her hands on the table and gave a slow, deliberate nod. John's eyes did not leave my mother's face. Stephen leaned back in his chair as though seeing me for the first time. And I, standing there with my heart pounding, felt lighter than I had in years. The room broke open the moment I sat back down. Aunt Susan demanded to know how long this had been happening, her voice sharp with disbelief. Uncle Frank leaned forward, asking John if he truly had no idea about the money. Janet stared between me and Barbara, her eyes wide as though she was watching a play where the script had suddenly flipped. Through it all, Dorothy's silence was heavier than any outburst. She fixed her daughter with a gaze that made the rest of us hold still. Finally, Dorothy spoke, her voice stern in a way I had rarely heard. Barbara, I am deeply disappointed. Your daughter has been sacrificing her own security while you mocked her. That isn't just ungrateful, it's cruel. The words cut clean, and for once, Barbara had no quick reply. She tried, stammering about family obligations. But Dorothy lifted a hand and ended the excuse before it began. John turned to his wife. And I saw something new on his face, anger mixed with confusion. Is it true, 2 years of car payments, surgery bills, loans, all hidden from me? Barbara fumbled, saying it was temporary, that she didn't want to worry him. But he shook his head. You had no problem embarrassing Laura in front of everyone. Now you don't want to discuss the truth that ends tonight. His words carried a finality I had never heard from him. Stephen finally found his voice. He spoke quietly, almost ashamed. Laura, if I had known you were the one who paid off my loans, I would have handled things differently. I should have asked if you needed help. I should have noticed. His admission felt raw, but it also showed how far away he had been all those years. Jennifer sat frozen, her fork untouched. She whispered, I don't understand why you didn't just say no. I turned to her, because I wanted to help. I thought maybe if I gave enough, I would finally matter. But I see now it was never enough. The table went quiet again, all eyes on Barbara, for the first time in my memory. She looked unsettled, her superiority cracking at the edges. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone felt it. The phone began ringing before I even made it home that Christmas night. And it did not stop for days. Normally, I would have answered every call, rushing to soothe feelings, to manage the family's moods, to patch over the cracks. This time I let them go to voicemail. I sat in the dark living room of my apartment, still in my green dress, listening to the buzz of unanswered calls while the engagement ring glimmered quietly on the coffee table. For the first time in my life, silence felt like strength. Mark flew back from Portland 2 days early when I told him what had happened. He found me curled on the couch with my phone lighting up beside me. He pulled me close, and when I asked if I had been too harsh, he shook his head. "Laura, you've been paying their bills while they called you useless. There is no universe where that's too harsh." His words settled into me like a steady anchor. John called first. His voice carried a weight I had never heard before. "Laura, I had no idea your mother was asking you for money. I should have stood up for you all these years. I'm sorry." It was the first genuine apology I had ever received from him. And though it didn't erase the past, it meant something. Stephen called the next day. "Laura, I feel awful about the loan. I want to pay you back." I told him it wasn't about the money. It's about the fact that you never asked if I needed anything. You assumed I was fine. He was quiet for a long moment before admitting, "I guess I always thought you were the strong one." Jennifer waited 3 days before reaching out. She started defensive, saying families help each other and no one forced me. I reminded her of her words at the table that I was the difficult one. For once, she had no quick response. After a pause, she admitted she had never thought about what it felt like from my side. Barbara was the most persistent. Dozens of calls, escalating from angry to pleading. She accused me of being selfish, of tearing the family apart. Then she shifted, suggesting maybe we could work something out. By the end of the week, her voice finally cracked, and she said she might have been too harsh. I listened, but I did not rush to comfort, for once. I let her sit with the silence. In the weeks that followed, the ground beneath our family shifted in ways I had never seen before. For John, the truth about the money was like a light switched on in a dark room. He confronted Barbara and insisted they see a financial counselor. For the first time in decades of marriage, they sat in an office together with someone neutral and laid out the numbers. John even picked up a part-time consulting job to ease the strain. Barbara, stripped of her excuses, admitted they had been living beyond their means. Watching them face reality without leaning on me was strangely liberating. Meanwhile, my own life began to expand in small but powerful ways. Without the monthly transfers draining my account, I saw my bank balance grow. For the first time since college, I had savings. Mark and I opened a joint account and started planning for our future instead of patching over my family's crises. At work, the difference was even sharper. With no late-night calls about bills or emergencies, I had the mental space to focus. My supervisor noticed my confidence in meetings and hinted at another promotion, but the change wasn't only financial, the emotional weight lifted too. I learned to answer the phone on my own terms, not out of obligation. When Barbara called now, I listened but didn't let her words sink hooks into me. I told her clearly no more loans, no more quiet humiliations. Boundaries that had once felt impossible now felt like the only way forward. For the first time, my role in the family was not caretaker or scapegoat, it was simply myself. 6 months later, Mark and I married in a small inn outside the city. The guest list was short, chosen with care. John walked me down the aisle, his hand trembling, his eyes damp. Grandma Dorothy beamed in the front row. Aunt Susan and Janet smiled with quiet pride. Stephen and Jennifer came, subdued, as if still measuring the new ground between us. Barbara was there too, dressed flawlessly, her face controlled, her voice softer than I remembered. The ceremony was simple. When I looked out, I didn't see obligation, only choice. These were the people who had shown respect. At the reception, John rose to speak, his voice caught. Laura has always been the heart of this family, though we didn't always see it. Mark, you're marrying someone strong, someone loyal. I only hope you'll honor her in the ways we sometimes failed." The honesty in his words struck deeper than any praise. Barbara spoke later, her remarks clipped and careful. "Laura, I was wrong. I hope you and Mark build a good life together. It wasn't warmth, but it was more than I had ever been given." And as Mark and I danced, I understood something new. I didn't need her blessing to feel whole. The joy was mine, built by my own choices. Life with Mark carried a lightness I had never known. We bought a modest house, filled it with things we chose together, not hand-me-downs. At work, I flourished, no longer drained by late-night calls or hidden bills. The girl once called useless now led her own team with confidence. My family ties shifted, uneven but real. John reached out more often, speaking of books or woodworking. Our conversations warm in a way they had never been. Stephen began to check on me, even asked for my advice once. A small but startling change. Jennifer stayed polite but distant, and I accepted that not every relationship could be mended. Barbara was the hardest. Old habits slipped through criticisms, comparisons, but I no longer stayed silent. When I pushed back, she sometimes apologized, awkward and halting, but it was more than before. I stopped waiting for her to become a different mother. What mattered was that I had changed. Nearly a year later, she called, her voice quieter than I remembered. "Laura, I ran into Mrs. Henderson. I told her about your promotion, your house, and I realized I don't think I've ever told you this directly. I'm proud of you. They were words I had once craved, but by then, I no longer needed them. Thank you." "Mom," I said, after we hung up. I smiled. Good. Really good. But the truth was, I would have been fine either way. That was the victory I had waited a lifetime to claim.